The air inside Lecture Hall 4 smelled of ozone and repressed predatory instincts. To Instructor Jaro Sen, it was the smell of a Tuesday. Jaro stood at the front of the amphitheater, his 4 optical sensors rotating independently to scan the tiered seating. Behind him, the panoramic reinforced glass wall offered a terrifying view of the Echo Rift. The rift was not merely a tear in space. It was a wound in the universe that refused to heal, a swirling vortex of violet and bruised gold that pulsed in rhythm with the collective anxiety of the station. Asymmetrical warfare is not about being stronger, Jaro said, his voice grating like gravel in a mixer. He tapped the holographic display with a clawed hand. It is about being the stone in the boot, the sand in the intake valve. He paused, letting the silence hang. He knew no one was looking at the tactical map. Every pair of eyes, vertical pupils, compound lenses, and cybernetic replacements was fixed on the back row. Specifically, they were fixed on the human male sitting in the shadow of a structural pillar. Peter. The boy sat with the stillness of a statue. He was slight, lacking the armored carapace of the krill or the muscle density of the Ursine cadets. He wore the standard-issue gray fatigues of Helix Bastion, which hung loosely on his frame. He was not taking notes. He was not checking his datapad. He was staring at the desk surface, his posture suggesting a desire to fold in on himself and vanish. Jaro narrowed his primary eyes. It was a phenomenon he had observed for 3 months. The class contained the scions of warlords, the heirs to trade empires, and biological weapons grown in vats. Yet their attention always drifted to the human. Not out of fear, but out of a curiosity reserved for something that did not belong. Peter shifted slightly, lifting his head to look out the window. Outside, the Echo Rift flared. A sudden spike of luminosity bright enough to cast long, sharp shadows across the lecture hall washed over the students. It lasted only a second, a heartbeat of cosmic light, before dimming back to its sullen violet glow. Coincidence, Jaro muttered to himself, though his dorsal spines twitched. It happened every time the boy looked at the damn thing. Attention, Jaro barked, bringing the room back to order. Today is not a lecture day. Today is the call. A ripple of tension went through the room. The call was the slang term for the bond trials assignment. In Helix Bastion, you did not graduate alone. You graduated as a pair, or you washed out. And the pairing was enforced by the neural braid, a psychosomatic link that shared pain adrenaline and proprioception. The algorithm has finished its assessment, Jaro announced. The administration has calculated your optimal survival compatibility to within 99% accuracy. When I call your name, you will accept your partner. You will not argue. You will not trade. The holographic board flickered, replacing the tactical map with a long list of names. Murmurs broke out. A massive reptilian cadet high-fived a floating silicon-based entity. The pairings were mostly predictable heavy infantry, matched with long-range support logic types, matched with intuitive types. Then the room went quiet. At the top of the list, the golden letters shimmered Alice Vulpera. Alice sat in the front row, her posture impeccable. She was of the Vulpera, a humanoid species known for their fox-like features, russet fur, and a terrifyingly high aptitude for kinetic strategy. She was royalty, the heir to a dominion that spanned 3 systems. Her tail usually still twitched, once a sign of immense irritation. Next to her name, the algorithm had placed its choice. Darius Kane. Darius, a Saurian shock trooper, with scales the color of dried blood, leaned back in his chair and grinned. His teeth were serrated knives. He was the top of the leaderboard. Ruthless, efficient, and arrogant enough to believe he owned the station. He looked at the back of Alice's head, with a possessive glint in his yellow eyes. A perfect match, Darius rumbled his voice, deep enough to vibrate the floorboards. Royalty and the apex, as it should be. Alice stood up, The sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoed like a gunshot. She did not look at Darius. She did not look at the board. Her eyes, burning with an intense emerald fire, were fixed on the back of the room. She picked up her data pad, which displayed the official assignment, and snapped it in half. The plastic crunched loudly. Jarrow stepped forward. "Cadet Alice, the algorithm is mandatory." "The algorithm is a suggestion," Alice said. Her voice was melodic, but carried the weight of a hammer. "I require a partner who listens, not one who preens." She began to walk up the tiered steps. Her boots clicked rhythmically. Every head turned to follow her. Darius's grin faltered, then twisted into a snarl of confusion. Alice walked past the heavy hitters. She walked past the tech geniuses. She climbed all the way to the shadowed back row, where the air was colder. She stopped in front of Peter. The human boy looked up. His face was pale, his eyes dark and encircled by exhaustion. He looked like he had not slept in a week. He did not flinch, which in itself was remarkable, given that a fox princess was looming over him like a storm cloud. Alice slammed her hand down on his desk. "You," she said, "with me." For 10 seconds, absolute silence reigned in Lecture Hall 4. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Then a strange sound filled the room. It was the sound of rustling fabric and shifting armor. Instructor Jarrow watched in disbelief as the top contenders of the class Darius included lowered their heads. It was a bow. But Jarrow knew xenoanthropology. This was not a bow of respect for a princess. This was the Venator's farewell. It was the gesture a predator made when they saw a prey animal walk voluntarily into a trap. They were acknowledging a dead man. By choosing the silent, weak human, Alice had essentially painted a target on his back and rung the dinner bell. Peter blinked. He looked at Alice's hand on his desk, then up at her face. He did not look grateful. He looked tired. "Princess," Peter said, his voice soft, dry, and painfully ordinary. "You sure—" A ripple of nervous laughter broke out from the avian cadets in the middle row. It was absurd. He was speaking to her as if she had asked him to pass. The salt knot offered him a place at the side of the most powerful student in the academy. Alice leaned in her ears, flattening against her skull. "Do not make me repeat myself, human. Stand up." Peter sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had hoped to stay invisible and had failed spectacularly. He slowly stood up. As he did, his sleeve rode up his right arm. Jarrow caught a glimpse of it before the fabric fell back into place. A thin, jagged white line running up the inside of the wrist. Jarrow's tactical mind processed the image instantly. That was not a battle scar. That was the burn mark of a rejected neurobraid. A previous connection that had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong. "Interesting," Jarrow whispered. "This is irregular," Darius Kane shouted, standing up and kicking his chair aside. "Instructor the human is a bottom feeder. His survival rating is barely above 0. This insults the integrity of the trials." "The integrity of the trials," Alice said without turning around, "is based on results. If I choose a handicap, that is my business. Unless you are afraid you will lose to a bottom feeder, Darius." Darius flushed a dark purple. He sat back down his claws, digging into the desk. "I look forward to watching him break," he hissed. Peter looked at Alice. "I am not a handicap," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "I am a liability. There is a difference." "I am counting on it," Alice replied. The news moved through Helix Bastion faster than a viral outbreak. By the time lunch cycle arrived, every screen in the mess hall seemed to be displaying the betting odds. Alice Volpera, the silent human odds of survival, 1 to 50. Peter sat at a corner table poking at a tray of nutrient paste that looked unappealingly gray. Across from him sat Tamsin Crow, a human cadet from the engineering track. Tamsin was small, frantic, and had grease stains permanently etched into her fingerprints. "Congratulations," Tamsin said, chewing on a synthetic apple. You have been upgraded. You were generic background human number 4. Now, you are royal liability. It is a very prestigious title. Comes with a target on your back the size of a shuttle bay. I prefer temporary disaster, Peter muttered. He took a bite of the paste and grimaced. She made a mistake. She will realize it by tomorrow and petition for a transfer. Alice Volpera does not make mistakes, Tamsin said, leaning in. And she definitely does not petition. She commands. Why did she pick you, Peter, seriously? You barely speak. You got a C- in hand-to-hand combat because you apologized to the training dummy. I did not apologize, Peter corrected. I asked it to stop. Same thing, Tamsin tapped her spoon on the table. Darius Kane is going to kill you, legally, during the simulations. You know that, right? He can try, Peter said. He said it without bravado, stating it like a weather forecast. A shadow fell over the table. Ravel Knox stood there. Knox was a changeling, a species capable of minor shapeshifting to blend into environments, though they usually kept a basic humanoid form in the academy. Knox had pale, translucent skin and eyes that seemed to have no pupils. Peter, Knox said, smiling. The smile did not reach the eyes. A fascinating turn of events. My employers in the logistics division are taking bets on how long your neurobraid will last before your mind snaps. The current over-under is 12 minutes. Go away, Knox, Tamsin snapped. Knox ignored her. He placed a small metallic chip on the table. If you want to cash out early, Peter, there are shuttles leaving for the outer rim. No shame in running. Some species are born to run. Peter looked at the chip. Then he looked at Knox. Keep your money, Ravel. If I run, who will you bet against? Knox's smile tightened. Brave, stupid but brave. He took the chip back and dissolved into the crowd. Peter watched him go. His heart rate had not increased by a single beat. Suddenly, his datapad buzzed. A priority message encrypted with a royal seal. Peter hesitated, then tapped the screen. It wasn't a text message. It was a voice, recording short and heavily distorted to prevent tracing. He fits. The voice was male, authoritative, and colder than the vacuum outside. Peter froze. The spoon halted halfway to his mouth. Across the mess hall, Alice was entering, surrounded by a phalanx of sycophants, trying to change her mind. She caught Peter's eye. She tapped her ear, indicating she had received the same message. For the first time since the class began, Peter looked genuinely afraid. Not of Darius, not of the rift, but of those two words, he fits. It wasn't approval. It sounded like the final click of a padlock snapping shut. Trial 1 commences in 5 minutes, the automated system announced. Sector 7, the Hall of Echoes. The Hall of Echoes was a notorious stress test. It was a long corridor lined with emitters that simulated the neurofeedback of the rift. It forced partners to synchronize their brainwaves or suffer debilitating migraines. Alice and Peter stood at the entrance. The airlock door was thick blast steel. Wrist, Alice commanded. Peter held out his arm. Alice slapped a sleek black bracelet onto his wrist, then placed a matching one on hers. The neurobraid interface. Initiating link, the system droned. A shockwave of sensation hit Peter. It wasn't pain. It was presence. Suddenly, he could feel a second heartbeat thumping in his chest faster and stronger than his own. He could feel the phantom sensation of a tail twitching for balance. He could feel a burning, white-hot rage that wasn't his Alice's rage. It tasted like copper and ash. Alice gasped, staggering slightly. She was feeling him too. But where she expected fear or weakness, she found silence. A vast, deep ocean of silence. Your mind, Alice whispered, staring at him. It is quiet. Too quiet. I practice, Peter said. He tapped his temple. No mind games, princess. That was the deal. You stay in your head, I stay in mine. We need to synchronize to pass the barrier, Alice argued, regaining her composure. Open up. If I open up, we both fall, Peter said. Trust me. Just follow my breathing. Cadets Vulpera and Peter enter. Instructor. Jaro's voice came over the intercom. The blast doors hissed open. The corridor ahead was bathed in strobing red light. The air hummed with psionic static. They stepped in. Immediately, the pressure dropped. The simulated rift noise screamed in their ears, a high-pitched whine that sounded like glass breaking inside the skull. Alice grit her teeth, her knees buckling. The neurobraid was transmitting the psychic weight of the simulation directly into her nervous system. She reached out, grabbing Peter's shoulder for support. "Focus," she hissed. "Fight it." Peter didn't fight it. He stood upright, his eyes unfocused. He wasn't resisting the noise. He was letting it pass through him. 1, 2, 1, 2. He forced his breathing into a slow, unnatural rhythm. Through the braid, Alice felt his heartbeat slow down to 40 beats per minute. It was impossible. He was in the middle of a psychic storm, and his body was entering a state of hibernation. The calmness was contagious. It flowed through the connection, cooling Alice's burning mind like water on hot iron. The pain receded. "Move," Peter said. They walked. While other pairs in the corridor were screaming, arguing, or collapsing as their synchronization failed, Peter and Alice moved in lockstep. Peter was the anchor. Alice was the sail. They reached the scanner at the midpoint. This was the hurdle. The machine had to read their combined biometric data to authorize passage. A blue laser swept over Alice. Subject Vulpera, status optimal. The laser swept over Peter. It paused. It swept again. The light turned yellow, then red. Error. Subject human unidentified. Error. Signal fragmentation. Error. Partial soul. Signature detected. The alarm blared. Identification failure. Security protocols engaging. What is wrong with you? Alice demanded, shaking his arm. What does partial signature mean? Peter looked at the console. He didn't look surprised. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a multi-tool, and jammed it into the scanner's access port. "Hey!" Alice shouted. "You cannot hack the trial." "I am not hacking it," Peter said, twisting the tool. Sparks showered onto the floor. "I am percussive maintenancing it." He slammed his fist against the side of the machine. "Beep. Scan complete. Welcome, Cadet Peter." The red lights turned green. The door at the far end opened. "You." Alice stared at him, bewildered. "You just hit it." "Old human trick," Peter said, rubbing his knuckles. "Machines get confused if you don't assert dominance." They walked out of the simulation into the observation deck. They were the first ones out. Jaro Sen was waiting for them, his clipboard lowered. He looked at the smoking scanner, then at Peter. "Record time," Jaro said. "Though your methods are unorthodox. The system had trouble reading you, Cadet Peter." "I have cold hands, sir," Peter lied. Jaro didn't buy it, but he marked the pass. Alice pulled Peter aside, dragging him into a secluded alcove near the ventilation shafts. She pinned him against the wall, her arm across his throat. The neurobraid pulsed with her suspicion. "My father sent that message," she whispered, her face inches from his. "He fits. He knows you. Why you are a nobody from a mining colony." Peter looked into her emerald eyes. He could feel her pulse racing through the link. He could feel the desperate need for answers, the grief for her brother that she buried under the anger. "Maybe your father just likes underdogs," Peter said. "Do not lie to me," Alice growled. "I felt it in the tunnel." "Your mind isn't empty, Peter. It is walled off. What are you hiding?" Before Peter could answer, a dull thump shook the floor. The lights in the corridor flickered and died, replaced by emergency amber strobes. A siren began to wail, not the drill siren, but the high-pitched scream of a containment breach. "Alert!" the station AI announced. Explosion detected in Rift Laboratory Sector 4. Structural integrity compromised. All cadets to muster stations. Sector 4, Alice's eyes widened. That is where the compatibility data is stored. She let go of Peter and ran toward the viewing port. Peter followed. Down below, across the central atrium, smoke was billowing from the research labs. It was a precise strike, not big enough to destroy the station, but precise enough to destroy servers. Through the smoke, a figure was moving. Most students were running away from the blast, but this figure was walking calmly away, blending into the shadows of the maintenance gantry. Peter narrowed his eyes. He recognized the gate. It was Ravel Knox. Knox stopped under a security camera. He looked up directly at the lens and smiled. He held up a hand and mimed a small explosion with his fingers. He is destroying the records, Peter realized aloud. The pairing data. Alice turned to him. Why, the pairings are already done. Not for us, Peter said, his voice dropping. For the Rift. Someone is trying to hide who is compatible with the Echo, and they just blew up the only list that proves it. Alice looked at the burning lab, then at the silent boy beside her. The connection between them hummed a low, steady vibration. We are not a mistake, Alice realized, the horror dawning on her. We are the target. Peter looked out at the Rift. It was pulsing again, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat of violet light that seemed to answer the alarm sirens. Welcome to the Team Princess, Peter said. Try not to get us killed before dinner. The medical bay of Helix Bastion was white sterile and smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt neural pathways. It was a place where biology was mended and where privacy went to die. Alice sat on the edge of the biobed, her legs swinging impatiently. She looked like a coiled spring, her russet tail flicking back and forth, with a rhythm that betrayed her agitation. Beside her, Peter sat with the stillness of a stone, staring at the floor tiles, as if they contained the secrets of the universe. Dr. Eris, a multi-limbed cephalon, with skin like wet marble, hovered over them. He held the permanent neurobraid injectors, two sleek silver devices that looked uncomfortably like pistols. This is not the temporary wrist link you used in the preliminary assessment, Dr. Eris warned, his voice bubbling through a translator collar. This is a subdermal cortex tap. It weaves into the base of the skull. You will share proprioception pain responses and adrenal spikes. There is no off switch. There is only volume control. Do it, Alice commanded. She did not look at Peter. We need the latency to be zero. No lag. No interference. If Ravel Knox or anyone else tries to hack the signal again, I want a hard line that they cannot touch. Peter looked up. He did not object, but he raised a hand to pause the doctor. One condition, Peter said. His voice was quiet, lacking the imperious edge of the princess, but it carried a strange weight. Alice turned her sharp emerald gaze toward him. You are negotiating now. No mind games, Peter said. He pointed to his own temple. You stay in your room, I stay in mine. The braid shares sensory data and tactical instinct. It does not give you the right to dig through my memories just because you are bored or suspicious. If you try to pry, I will shut down. I will turn into a brick, and you will fail the semester. Alice narrowed her eyes. She was used to subjects who bowed, not partners who drew lines in the sand. But she saw the resolve in his gray eyes. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. Agreed, Alice said, though the word tasted sour. I have no interest in the clutter of a human mind regardless. Just keep up. Dr. Eris moved in. Initiating sync on 3, 2, 1. The sensation was not like a needle. It was like a lightning strike that bypassed the skin and hit the soul. Peter gasped, his back arching, involuntarily. For a second, he was not in the medical bay. He was running through a red forest, smelling prey, feeling the power of muscles that were not his own feeling, a burning, jagged hole of grief in his chest that screamed for blood. Alice, conversely, slumped forward. She felt a sudden crushing weight. It was not physical. It was the weight of silence. She felt a profound exhaustion, a wall of gray static that dampened her fiery senses. It felt like standing in a bunker while a war raged outside. Then, the connection stabilized. The feedback loop settled into a low hum at the base of their skulls. Alice shook her head, blinking rapidly. "By the void," she whispered, looking at Peter with a new, unsettled expression. "Is that what it feels like to be you? It is so heavy." "You get used to the gravity," Peter said, rubbing the back of his neck where the silver port now shimmered. "Let us go. Tamsin is waiting." The common area for the tactical cadets was a chaotic mix of cultures and biologies. Methane breathers had their specialized tanks in one corner, while the reptilian cadets basked under heat lamps in another. Peter and Alice walked in, and the conversation died instantly. The bond between them was invisible, but the change in their dynamic was palpable. They walked in, stepped their strides, perfectly matched a subconscious side effect of the fresh braid. Tamsin Crow was sitting on a crate of ammunition, soldering a circuit board. She looked up, her goggles magnifying her eyes to comical proportions. "Well, look at the happy couple," Tamsin drawled, flipping her goggles up. "The surgery was a success. I assume you are both walking in a straight line." "The braid is functional," Alice said stiffly. She stood with her arms crossed, radiating an aura that said, "Do not approach." "Functional is a strong word," Peter muttered, sitting down heavily on the bench opposite Tamsin. "It is loud." Tamsin grinned, wiping grease onto her jumpsuit. "Congrats, Peter. You got upgraded to royal liability. I checked the betting pool. The odds of you surviving the week have actually gone down. People think the neural feedback from Her Highness will fry your little primate brain." "I prefer temporary disaster," Peter corrected, reaching for a water pouch. "And her feedback is manageable. It is mostly just impatience." Alice's tail lashed, whacking Peter in the arm. Peter didn't flinch. He just moved his arm an inch to the left before the impact happened, anticipating the motion through the link. "Stop anticipating me," Alice snapped. "Stop telegraphing," Peter retorted without looking at her. Tamsin laughed. "Oh, this is going to be fantastic. You two are like a married couple who just realized they hate the same restaurant. But listen, I have news. The simulation schedule is up." You drew the short straw. "Trial 1, Alice said, her eyes flashing. "Let me guess. The zero-G maze." "Worse," Tamsin said. "Zero-G maze. With the Predator protocol active. And guess who you are up against?" Across the room, Darius Kane stood up. The massive saurian flexed his claws, ripping a metal table leg off its mounting, just to make a point. He pointed a jagged claw at Peter. "Fresh meat!" Darius roared. Alice stepped in front of Peter, her instincts flaring red-hot through the braid. "He is not meat, Darius. He is mine." Peter sighed, leaning his head back against the wall. "Please, stop calling me things that sound like property. It is confusing the translators." The zero-G maze was a spherical combat arena, filled with floating debris, rotating walls, and absolute darkness. The objective was simple: reach the beacon at the center. The obstacle was the opposing team, whose goal was to intercept and disable. Peter and Alice floated in the airlock, their mag boots locked to the starting plate. The room was pitch black, lit only by the faint HUDs in their visors. "Strategy," Alice said over the comms, her voice tight. "We push fast. I will take point. My kinetic blast can clear the debris. You stay behind me and cover my blind spot. If Darius engages, I will draw his fire." "No," Peter said. Alice turned her helmet toward him. "Excuse me. Darius is a saurian," Peter explained, his voice calm. "His species hunts by movement and thermal plumes. If you use kinetic blasts, you will light us up like a flare. We will be dead in 30 seconds. "I am the top duelist in this academy," Alice hissed. "I do not hide." Today you do, Peter said. Trust the braid. The buzzer sounded. The airlock opened into the void. Alice wanted to kick off to launch herself into the fray with the fury of her ancestors. But she felt a tug in her mind, a cold, heavy anchor. It was Peter. He was not moving. He was drifting. She forced herself to yield, letting his calmness override her adrenaline. They pushed off gently, using fingertips to guide themselves along the floating bulkheads. "Lights off," Peter commanded. "I cannot see," Alice argued. "You do not need to see. You have ears, and you have me." Peter reached into his suit's utility interface. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was accessing the suit's external speakers, the ones used for emergency broadcasting. "What are you doing?" Alice demanded internally. "Creating ghosts," Peter thought back. He activated the speakers, but he did not speak. Instead, he played a looped audio file. It was a low, rhythmic thumping sound. Thump, 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 thump. It sounded like a heartbeat, a terrified, racing heartbeat. He threw a piece of scrap metal across the room. It clanged against a far wall. Then he projected the sound toward that location, using the directional speakers. In the darkness, something shifted. Darius and his partner were moving. They heard the heartbeat. They heard the fear. Their predator instincts kicked in, overriding their tactical training. They launched themselves toward the sound claws, tearing through the metal barriers. "Move, now," Peter signaled. Alice and Peter glided in the opposite direction, silent as vacuum. They are distracted, Alice realized. She could feel Darius's frustration radiating through the arena as he tore apart an empty section of the maze, finding nothing but an echoing speaker. "Fear is a tool," Peter whispered. "But so is hunger. They are so hungry for a kill they forgot to check the corners." They reached the beacon. It was a glowing blue sphere, suspended in the center of the complex. Suddenly, Darius dropped from the ceiling directly between them and the objective. He had realized the ruse. He was furious. His thermal vision was searching, scanning. Alice prepared to fight. She gathered energy in her gauntlets. "Wait," Peter said. He tapped a sequence on his wrist. The external speakers on Darius's own suit, which Peter had silently bridged into while Darius was distracted, suddenly blared at maximum volume. It wasn't a heartbeat this time. It was the high-frequency screech of a feedback loop. Darius roared, clutching his head, his sensitive hearing overwhelmed. He spun uncontrollably in zero-gravity, disoriented. Peter drifted past the thrashing giant, reached out and tapped the beacon. "Winner Team Vulpera Human," the lights flooded on. Alice floated there, staring at Peter. He hadn't fired a single shot, he hadn't thrown a single punch. He had turned their enemy's senses against them. "You," Alice murmured. Through the braid she probed him. She was looking for the triumph, the smugness of victory. She found nothing. Inside Peter's mind, there was no celebration. There was just a vast, hollow room. It felt like he was holding a door shut against a storm, and this victory was just a minor chore that had to be done to keep the door closed. "What are you?" she asked. Peter unlatched his helmet. "I am the guy who wants to pass the class. Let us go eat." The locker room was steam-filled and noisy. Darius Kane sat on a bench nursing a headache that likely felt like a nail in the brain. When Peter walked in, the room went silent. Darius stood up. He towered over Peter, his shadow swallowing the human. "You fight like a coward, human," Darius growled. "Tricks, noise. You bring no honor to the Bastion." Peter continued unbuckling his flight suit. He folded it neatly. "Honor is expensive, Darius. I cannot afford it on my stipend." "You mock me!" Darius slammed his fist into the locker next to Peter's head. Metal crumpled. "You think you won, you just delayed the inevitable. You cannot hide behind the princess forever." Peter stopped. "Peter." He turned slowly to face the massive predator. He did not look up with fear. He looked up with a weariness that was almost terrifying in its intensity. "Darius," Peter said softly, "have you ever tried winning without being admired?" Darius blinked. The question confused him. "What? You fight because you want them to cheer," Peter said. "You want the glory. You want the fear in their eyes. You are addicted to the audience." Peter leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I do not care if they cheer. I do not care if they remember my name. I just want the job done. And that makes me dangerous to you. Because while you are posing for the camera, I am cutting the brake lines." Darius opened his mouth to roar, to strike, to crush this insolent insect. "Touch him," a voice cut through the steam, "and I will remove the hand." Alice stood at the doorway. She was not wearing her armor, just her uniform, but she looked more dangerous than the rift itself. Her eyes were glowing. "He is right, Darius," Alice said, walking to Peter's side. "You are loud, and you are boring." Darius snarled, but he backed down. The combination of the human's eerie calm and the fox princess's murderous intent was enough to pause even him. He stormed out, kicking a bench on his way. Peter looked at Alice. "I had that handled." "I know," Alice said, "but I enjoy seeing him run." High above in the observation deck, Instructor Jaro Sen watched the telemetry data on his screen. He wasn't looking at the combat scores. He was looking at the neural synchronization charts. Usually, a bonded pair showed two distinct waveforms that intersected occasionally, a dominant wave and a submissive wave. But the chart for Alice and Peter was different. The two waves were not fighting. They were not even harmonizing in the traditional sense. They were mirroring. Where Alice's graph spiked with aggression, Peter's dipped with calculation, creating a perfect flat line of stability. They were canceling out each other's weaknesses in real time. "Perfect phase cancellation," Jaro whispered. He glanced out the window. The echo rift was churning. Deep in the violet swirl, small fractures of white light were appearing. They looked like lightning, but they were not moving randomly. They were pulsing, thump-thump. The rift was matching the rhythm of the heartbeat Peter had played in the simulation. "It is listening," Jaro realized, a cold shiver running down his spine. "It likes them." Trial 2 took place 3 days later. The simulation environment was the Sprawl, a hyper-realistic recreation of an interspecies slum. Narrow alleys, neon signs in 50 languages, holographic rain, and civilians. The objective, rescue a VIP hostage held by a gang of mercenaries. Alice and Peter crouched on a rooftop looking down at the target building. "Standard breach," Alice proposed. "We go through the skylight, drop flashbangs, neutralize the hostiles, grab the target." Too much collateral," Peter said. He was scanning the street level. "Look at the civilians. They are programmed to panic. If we start a firefight, the AI civilians will stampede. We lose points for every civilian casualty." "They are simulations, Peter," Alice said dismissively. "They are code." "The test is not about shooting," Peter said. "It is about decision-making. We go in quietly, front door." "The front door is guarded," Alice pointed out. "Not for long." Peter guided them down the fire escape. They approached the two guards, hulking bovinoids with plasma rifles. Alice reached for her weapon. Peter put a hand on her wrist. He walked out of the shadows, hands up. "Hey," Peter shouted. "Delivery." The guards turned surprised. Before they could raise their rifles, Peter kicked a pile of trash cans over. Rats, simulated but nasty, swarmed out. While the guards were distracted, stomping on the rats, Alice moved. She didn't kill them. She used a nerve pinch technique Peter had suggested. They dropped silently. They moved inside. The building was a maze of booby traps, laser tripwires, pressure plates, automated turrets. They reached the holding cell. The VIP was tied to a chair. But as Peter stepped forward to cut the bonds, he froze. "Wait," he said. "What?" Alice asked, covering the door. "The knots," Peter said. "They are loose and the VIP is not sweating." Peter looked at the hostage. It was a cadet from the senior class, playing the role. The cadet smirked. "It is a trap," Alice realized. Suddenly, the floor panel slid open. A containment field sprang up around them. The hostage stood up and pulled a weapon. It was an ambush. The rival team, the ones supposed to be the gang, stepped out from the shadows. "Game over, princess," the lead mercenary laughed. He reached for a lever to activate the electrified floor. "Alice, the ceiling!" Peter shouted. Alice didn't hesitate. She fired a kinetic blast straight up. The structural supports shattered. A massive water tank on the roof above them collapsed. Thousands of gallons of water crashed down into the room. The water short-circuited the containment field. It also washed the mercenaries off their feet. The electric floor sparked and sizzled, dangerous, but shorted out. Peter grabbed Alice, anchoring them to a pipe. The water subsided. The mercenaries were groaning, tangled in debris. The hostage was hanging precariously from a broken beam over a pit of exposed sparking wires. "Help!" the hostage screamed. "This is not part of the script. The safety protocols failed." Alice looked at him. "He tried to fail us. Leave him." "No," Peter said. He unclipped his safety line and waded through the electrified water, hopping on dry debris. He reached the hanging cadet. "Give me your hand," Peter yelled. "Why?" The cadet stammered, terrified. "I tried to trap you." "Because if you die, I have to fill out paperwork," Peter shouted. He grabbed the cadet and hauled him to safety just as the beam collapsed into the sparks. Peter dragged the shivering rival to the dry platform, where Alice stood. He dropped him at her feet. "Target secured," Peter said, panting. Technically, he was the hostage. "We saved him." Alice stared at Peter. Her chest was heaving. The rage inside her, the Vulpera instinct to cull the weak, to punish betrayal, was screaming for blood. But Peter's mind washed over hers. It was not judgmental. It was just decent. "Why?" Alice asked, her voice trembling. "Why save the enemy?" "Because," Peter said, wringing out his shirt, "if we let him die, we are just better killers. I want to be better than that." The simulation ended. The lights came up. Later that evening, they sat on the roof of the Academy barracks, overlooking the vast star-filled void. The braid was quiet, a hum of shared exhaustion. Alice held a small object in her hand. It was a component she had pulled from the trap mechanism, in the simulation, the one that had malfunctioned and almost killed the student. "This was not a standard malfunction," Alice said quietly. "Someone rigged the voltage to be lethal." She held the chip up to the starlight. Etched into the silicon was a tiny golden symbol, a circle with a spike through it. "The Aurum mark," Alice whispered. Her voice was cold enough to freeze the air. Peter looked at it. "Who is that?" "Garin Malth," Alice said. "The consul, the arms dealer." Her hand shook. "He supplied the weapons that raided my home sector 3 years ago. The weapons that killed my brother. This mark is his signature. He is not just selling weapons anymore. He is selling accidents." Peter saw the flash of memory through the braid. A burning palace. A body falling. A scream that never ended. He felt her pain, as if it were his own. It was a physical blow. He reached out and placed his hand over hers. He didn't tell her to calm down. He didn't tell her it would be okay. "We found the fingerprint," Peter said. "Now, we find the hand." Alice looked at him. The fire in her eyes was different now. It wasn't just rage. It was focus. But there was doubt, too. "Peter," she said, "if I go down this path, if I burn Malth and his empire, what is left?" "That is the question, isn't it?" Peter said softly. "Revenge is a fuel. It burns hot. But engines cannot run on fire forever. Eventually, you have to build something.
And after revenge, who are you?
She asked, repeating the question he had planted in her mind during the trials.
I do not know, Peter admitted.
But we can find out. Together. Peter pulled up his datapad. Look at this. While you were extracting the chip, I traced the signal source. He displayed a schematic of the Academy network. A red line pulsed leading from the simulation controls to a secure server in the logistics wing. The data from our trials, Peter said. The sync rates, the biometric feedback. It is all being funneled to one user.
Malth,
Alice asked.
No,
Peter said. The middleman. He tapped the screen. The user ID resolved into a name, Ravel Knox. Knox is not just betting on us, Peter said grimly. He is measuring us. He is looking for a specific frequency, a specific compatibility. The key, Alice realized. The rumors about the rift. They say it needs a key to open the door for the invasion fleet. Malth thinks we are it. Peter stood up, looking out at the Echo Rift. It swirled silently in the distance, a beautiful deadly eye watching them back. He thinks we are the key, Peter said. Let us show him we are the lock. And the hammer, Alice added, standing beside him. She squeezed his hand. For the first time, the neurobraid did not feel like a chain. It felt like a lifeline. 2 heartbeats distinct, but synchronized beating, against the silence of the void. The corridors of Helix Bastion were usually filled with the sterile hum of air recyclers and the rhythmic marching of boots. But to Alice Vulpera and Peter, the station had changed. It was no longer a school. It was a hunting ground. The neurobraid connecting them was currently dormant, a low-voltage buzz at the base of their skulls. But the tension between them was loud enough to deafen a bat. We are not just passing this trial, Alice said. She was pacing the length of their preparation room, her tail lashing the air like a whip. We are using it. Knox will be watching. He needs data on our compatibility. Fine. I will give him data so terrifying he chokes on it. Peter sat on the bench, tightening the straps of his kinetic vest. He looked tired. Not the physical exhaustion of the gym, but the deep, marrow-level weariness of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Alice, Peter said, his voice level. You are talking about baiting a trap with your own neck. Knox is not a student. He is an agent. If we push him, he will not just push back. He will detonate. Let him, Alice snarled. She stopped pacing and turned to him, her emerald eyes blazing. He works for the man who killed my brother. Every second I do not have my claws in his throat is an insult to my house. Peter stood up. He walked over to her, ignoring the sparks of aggression radiating from her posture. He stopped, a foot away. Revenge is a focused beam, Princess, Peter said softly. But if you widen the lens too much, you burn everything around you, including us. Alice stared at him. For a moment, the mask of the warrior princess slipped, revealing the grieving sister beneath. I do not know how else to breathe, Peter. Hate is the only air I have left. Then let me hold your breath for you, Peter said. The intercom crackled to life, interrupting the moment. Trial 3, commencing in 10 minutes. Sector 9. The Psi Wastes. Peter grabbed his helmet. Let us go. But remember the condition. No mind games. And if you start hunting ghosts in the simulation, I am pulling the plug. Alice put on her helmet, her face hardening back into porcelain and steel. Just keep up, human. The Psi Wastes simulation was a masterpiece of cruelty. The arena was a vast, mud-churned battlefield under a gray weeping sky. Ruined buildings jutted out of the fog, like broken teeth. But the physical terrain was the least of their worries. Welcome to the feedback loop, Instructor Jaro Sen's voice echoed from the sky. The enemies in this sector are psycho-reactive. The more fear you feel, the more of them will spawn. The more anger you project, the stronger they become. If you panic, you die. Begin. Peter and Alice materialized in a muddy trench. Immediately, the neurobraid flared. Alice's pulse was racing. 120 beats per minute. She was scanning the horizon, looking for threats, looking for knocks, looking for anything to destroy. Calm down, Peter thought, projecting the intent rather than the words. Get out of my head, Alice snapped back through the link. Ahead of them, the fog swirled. A figure emerged. It was a standard combat droid, skeletal and chrome. But as Alice focused her aggression on it, the droid shifted. It grew larger. Spikes erupted from its shoulders. Its eyes turned a burning red. You are feeding it, Peter warned. I am engaging it, Alice yelled. She vaulted out of the trench, her gauntlets charging with kinetic energy. She fired. The blast hit the droid, shattering its arm. But the violence of her action rippled through the simulation. The fog thickened. 2 more droids stepped out. Then 4, then 8. They were feeding on her rage. Alice, stop! Peter shouted, climbing out of the mud. I can take them! She roared. She was a whirlwind of motion, dodging plasma fire, crushing metal with enhanced strikes. But for every enemy, she destroyed 2 more rows from the mud shaped by her fury. They were getting faster, sharper. Peter looked around. Other teams were already breaking. To his left, a pair of avian cadets were screaming at each other, their panic manifesting as a swarm of flying drones that tore them apart until their safety shields activated, and they were teleported out, failed. The noise in Peter's head was becoming unbearable. Alice's rage was a physical roar through the braid, a tsunami of kill, kill, kill. He had to anchor her. Peter did not draw his weapon. Instead, he walked into the crossfire. Plasma bolts sizzled past his ears. He ignored them. He walked straight toward Alice, who was currently wrestling a massive, 4-armed warbot. Alice, Peter said. He didn't shout. He spoke with the same flat, boring tone he used to order lunch. Alice spun around wild-eyed. Shoot them. Why are you not shooting? Peter reached out and grabbed her hand. The contact was electric. Through the neurobraid, Peter pushed. He didn't push a command. He pushed a memory. It was a memory of a rainy day on a mining colony. Just the sound of rain hitting a tin roof. The smell of wet earth. The feeling of a warm cup of tea in cold hands. Boring. Mundane, safe. The sensory input hit Alice like a bucket of ice water. The rage in her mind stuttered. What? She gasped. Breathe, Peter said. Match my heart. Thump, 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 thump. Peter's heart was beating at a steady 60 beats per minute. He stood amidst the chaos, utterly unimpressed by the danger. The effect was instantaneous. The warbot Alice was fighting slowed down. Its red eyes dimmed to a dull orange. The swarm of droids surrounding them hesitated, their programming confused by the sudden drop in emotional voltage. It is quiet, Alice whispered, her chest heaving. It is just a simulation, Alice, Peter said, releasing her hand, but keeping the mental link tight. These things are not Malth. They are not your brother's killers. They are just code. Do not give them the satisfaction of your anger. The droids began to dissolve back into the mud. The threat level dropped to 0. They stood there in the rain, the only sound, the distant, mournful vibration of the echo rift outside the station, sounding like a cello played in a deep cave. Suddenly, a scream broke the silence. 50 yards away, Darius Kane was dying. The Saurian prodigy had been separated from his partner. He was backed against a crumbling wall, surrounded by at least 30 high-level hunter-killers. Darius was roaring, firing his heavy cannon blindly. But his fear, the primal fear of a predator who has become prey, was feeding the system. The hunter-killers were evolving, becoming faster-growing armor that deflected his shots. "Help me!" Darius bellowed, his pride forgotten. Alice looked at him, her lip curled. "He wanted to break you. Let him fail." Peter looked at the swarm. "If he fails, the simulation ramps up the difficulty for everyone remaining. We cannot afford the variable." "That is a tactical excuse," Alice said. "You just want to save him." "He is a classmate," Peter said. "Cover me." Peter ran toward Darius. He didn't run with grace. He ran with efficient, choppy strides. "Darius, cease fire!" Peter yelled. "Are you insane, human?" Darius screamed, ducking a blade that took a chunk out of the wall. "They will overrun us. They are reacting to your adrenal output." Peter slid into cover beside the massive lizard. "Stop shooting! Turn off your targeting computer." "I will be defenseless." "You are already dead if you keep fighting." Peter grabbed Darius's armored collar and yanked him down. "Look at me. Look at my eyes." Darius looked. He saw the gray, empty calmness of the human. It was terrifyingly void. "I am going to tell you a joke," Peter said. Darius stared at him. "What?" "A joke," Peter repeated. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" "I do not know what a chicken is," Darius yelled, flinching, as a laser blast scorched his shoulder pauldron. "It is a flightless bird, a prey animal. It crossed the road to get to the other side. But in a quantum universe it was already on both sides." Peter said it with zero comedic timing. Darius stared. The sheer absurdity of the moment, the bullets, the mud, the monotone human explaining poultry. Physics short-circuited his panic. He felt a bubble of confusion which replaced the fear. The hunter-killers paused. They sensed the shift. The panic was gone, replaced by bewilderment. They slowed down. "Now," Peter whispered, "we walk away slowly." Peter stood up. He pulled Darius up. They walked backward away from the swarm. The droids did not pursue. They simply watched their aggression subroutines idling. They reached Alice, who was waiting with her arms crossed, looking impressed despite herself. Darius slumped against a wall, his breathing ragged. He looked at Peter with a strange expression. It was no longer the look of a predator viewing prey. It was the look of a soldier viewing a terrifyingly calm officer. "You," Darius rasped. "You stopped them with nonsense." "I stopped them by cutting the fuel line," Peter said. "You run hot, Darius. Sometimes you need to run cold." Darius nodded slowly. "A leader who does not show teeth," he rumbled. "I have heard of such things. I did not think they worked." He tapped his chest plate in a salute, not the mocking one from the classroom, but a genuine warrior's acknowledgement. "I owe you a life debt, human." "Buy me a sandwich and we are even," Peter said. The victory was short-lived. An hour later, Peter and Alice were in the locker room, changing out of their mud-caked gear. The adrenaline of the trial had faded, leaving them with the buzzing intimacy of the neurobraid. Ravel Knox walked in. He was alone. The locker room was otherwise empty, most students having gone to the mess hall to celebrate or lick their wounds. Knox held a datapad in his hand. His face was a mask of sympathetic concern. "Impressive performance," Knox said, his voice silky. "Truly, the way you control the princess is masterful, Peter." "Watch your mouth, Knox," Alice said, stepping out from behind a row of lockers. She was still in her undersuit, her hair wet. "I am only trying to help," Knox said, holding up his hands. "I found something. While you were playing hero in the mud, I was doing some digging into the archives. I thought you should know who you are bonded to, Princess." He tossed the datapad to Alice. She caught it. Peter felt a spike of cold dread in his stomach. Not because he was guilty, but because he knew how fragile Alice's trust really was. Alice looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. Her pupils constricted into vertical slits. The screen displayed a security log from 3 years ago. The location, the orbital docks of the Vulpera homeworld. The timestamp matched the exact hour of the assassination of Prince Varan, Alice's brother. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed a figure opening the maintenance hatch that allowed the assassin's entry. The figure turned to the camera. It was Peter. Or rather, it was a boy who looked exactly like Peter, wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit, holding a heavy wrench. The caption read, "ID confirmed. Peter J. Tarrant. Access code authorized." Alice stopped breathing. The silence in the locker room was heavy, suffocating. Through the neurobraid, Peter felt the change. The calm ocean of Alice's mind vanished. In its place, a volcano erupted. It was a red, blinding heat that tasted of copper and betrayal. "Alice!" Peter started taking a step forward. "That is not—" She moved faster than human eyes could follow. 1 second Peter was standing. The next, he was slammed against the metal lockers, his feet dangling 6 inches off the floor. Alice's hand was wrapped around his throat. Her claws were extended, digging into his skin, drawing beads of blood. "You!" she hissed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was a guttural growl. "You opened the door." "Alice, look at the date," Peter choked out, grasping her wrist but not striking back. "I was on the colony. I was 14. "The logs do not lie," Alice screamed. Tears were streaming down her face, boiling with rage. "You were there. You let them in. My brother died because of you." She squeezed harder. Peter's vision began to spot. The neurobraid was screaming feedback, looping between his suffocation and her murderous grief. He could feel her desire to snap his neck. It would be so easy. He didn't fight her. He didn't use the nerve pinch. He didn't hack the lights. He just looked at her. He looked at the pain in her eyes, the absolute devastation of a girl who thought she had finally found a safe harbor, only to find a minefield. "If you need a villain," Peter whispered, his voice failing, "make sure it is true." Alice's hand trembled. She roared a sound of pure anguish and raised her other hand to deliver a lethal strike to his chest. "Enough." The voice was like a thunderclap. Instructor Jaro Sen stood at the entrance. He didn't look like a teacher. He looked like a war machine. He held a heavy riot suppression staff. "Release him, Cadet Volpera," Jaro barked. Alice didn't let go. "He killed Varen," she sobbed, still pinning Peter. "He did not," Jaro said, stepping forward. He held up his own datapad. "I have been monitoring Nox's data packets since the lab explosion. I expected this." Jaro tapped a command. A hologram projected into the air between them. It showed the same video file Alice was watching. Then Jaro peeled back a layer of code. "Warn deepfake. Algorithm detected. Source user Nox. Original footage retrieved." The video shifted. The face of the boy in the jumpsuit flickered and changed. It wasn't Peter. It was a generic dock worker, his face obscured by a mask. The timestamp also shifted. The original footage was from a routine inspection 2 weeks prior to the murder. "It is a forgery," Jaro said, his voice dropping to a gravelly rumble. "A high-quality one. Nox spliced Peter's biometric data onto an existing file. He wanted you to kill your partner Alice, and you almost gave him exactly what he wanted." Alice froze. The red haze in her mind began to clear, replaced by a cold, sick horror. She looked at Peter. His face was turning blue. Blood trickled down his neck where her claws had pierced the skin. He wasn't fighting. He was just watching her, waiting for her to decide. She let go. Peter dropped to the floor, gasping for air, coughing violently. He massaged his throat, his chest heaving. Alice backed away, staring at her own hands. She was shaking uncontrollably. "I saw it. I felt it. The truth, it felt so real." "That is what Ravel Nox does," Jaro said, lowering his staff. "He weaponizes trust. He knew you were getting too close. He needed to sever the bond." Jaro looked at Peter. "Do you wish to file a formal complaint? Cadet assault with lethal intent is grounds for immediate expulsion of the aggressor." Peter stood up slowly. He wiped the blood from his neck with his sleeve. He took a deep breath, swallowing painfully. He looked at Alice. She couldn't meet his eyes. She looked small, defeated, broken. "No complaint," Peter rasped. "We were practicing close-quarters grappling. I slipped." Jarrow looked at him for a long moment, his optical sensors whirring. You are a strange species, Peter. Very well. Get cleaned up. But know this Nox is not done. Jarrow turned and left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was the silence of shame. Alice stood facing the corner. I could have killed you, she whispered. I wanted to. I know, Peter said. His voice was rough. I felt it. How can you stand there? Alice turned her eyes red-rimmed. How can you look at me? I am a monster. I let a picture on a screen turn me against the only person who... She trailed off. Peter walked over to her. He didn't hug her. He just stood within arm's reach. You are not a monster, Alice. You are wounded. Wounded things bite. It is nature. I am sorry, she said. The words sounded foreign and her royal accent stiff and awkward. I apologize. It was an error in judgment. Peter cracked a small, painful smile. Princess, that was terrible. You sound like a press release. Alice huffed a wet, choking laugh, escaping her. I am trying, you idiot. Next time, Peter said, pointing to his bruised neck. Punch me first. It is faster, and less melodramatic. Alice looked at him, tears welling up again. I promise. Next time I will just break your nose. Deal. We cannot let him get away with this, Alice said 10 minutes later. They were moving through the ventilation shafts of the station. The mood had shifted from tragedy to cold, hard determination. We won't, Peter said. I traced the upload signature of the fake video. It didn't come from the student dorms. It came from the derelict sector, Deck 12. Deck 12 is sealed, Alice whispered. Radiation leak. Fake leak, Peter corrected. Perfect cover for a rat like Nox. They dropped down into a maintenance corridor. The lights here were flickering, buzzing with decay. The air smelled of stale ozone. They crept forward, moving in perfect sync. The neurobraid was active again, but the signal was different. It was cautious, tender. Alice was subconsciously shielding her emotions, afraid to hurt him again. Peter was gently pushing back, letting her know he was still there, still solid. They reached a heavy blast door. Peter bypassed the lock with his multi-tool. The door hissed open. Inside it wasn't a maintenance closet. It was a command center. Banks of servers lined the walls. A holographic map of the Echo Rift dominated the center of the room. And on the main screen, a communication channel was open. The face on the screen was Consul Garen Malth. He looked older than in the news feeds. His skin was scarred, his eyes cruel and intelligent. He was speaking to someone off-screen, Nox. Timeline is accelerated, Malth was saying. The rift is responding to the pair. Their resonance frequency is increasing. We cannot wait for graduation. The gauntlet, Nox's voice replied from the shadows of the room. The final exam. It is in 2 days. The chaos will be sufficient cover. Good, Malth smiled. Bring the fleet to the perimeter. When the rift opens, we enter. I want the academy secured, and I want the girl and the boy alive. They are the suture. Without them, the gate collapses. Understood, Consul. The transmission ended. Peter and Alice crouched in the doorway, their hearts pounding in unison. Gauntlet Day, Peter whispered. They are going to invade during the final exam. And they need us, Alice realized. They need us alive to keep the rift open. Suddenly, a light flared in the room. A flashbang grenade rolled to their feet. Move! Peter shoved Alice back into the corridor, just as the grenade detonated. Boom! White light blinded them. Their audio receptors rang. When the smoke cleared, the command center was empty. The back exit was swinging shut. Nox was gone. But on the floor where Nox had been standing, a single message had been spray-painted in luminous ink. The Regent knows. He chose the key. Alice stared at the words. The Regent, my father. He fits, Peter murmured, the realization hitting him like a hammer. Your father didn't choose me because I was a good match for you, Alice. He chose me because I am a component." Alice slid down the wall, sitting on the dirty floor. The weight of the conspiracy was crushing. Her brother dead, her father using her as a pawn, her enemy hunting her, and her partner. She looked up at Peter. He was standing guard, watching the shadows, his multi-tool gripped like a knife. He looked small against the darkness, but he was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down, surprised. "Peter," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I do not care what my father planned. I do not care what Mouth wants. I do not care about the prophecy or the rift." She pulled him down so she could look him in the eye. In the dark, miserable hallway covered in grime and blood, she looked more royal than she ever had on a throne. "I do not want to lose you to my anger," she said. "And I will not lose you to them." Peter squeezed her hand. The neurobraid hummed a warm golden note that drowned out the distant wail of the rift. "Then we changed the script," Peter said. "They want a key, let us give them a crowbar." Outside the hull, the echo rift flared again. But this time it didn't look like a wound. It looked like an opening eye waiting to see what the two small creatures inside the station would do next. The morning of the gauntlet began with a silence that felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the hull of Helix Bastion. It was the day of the final assessment, the day every cadet had spent years training for, yet the atmosphere in the Tactical Command Center was not one of anticipation, but of dread. Instructor Jaro Sen stood before the main console, his 4 optical sensors narrowing as they scanned the scrolling lines of code that defined the parameters of the day's exam. His claws clicked rhythmically against the metal edge of the desk, a nervous tick he had not displayed since his days on the front lines of the border wars. "This is incorrect," Jaro rumbled to the automated system. Query: why are the safety dampeners disengaged? Why are the lethal force inhibitors set to 0%? The AI's voice was smooth, synthetic, and utterly unhelpful. "Override authorization code Alpha 90. Command Origin High Administration. The gauntlet requires total realism to ensure graduate quality." "Realism is one thing," Jaro growled, tapping the screen where the casualty projection models were flashing red. "This is a slaughterhouse." He tried to input a countercommand, but the system locked him out. The screen flashed a simple message, observation mode only. Jaro looked up at the panoramic window. Outside, the echo rift was churning violently, its usual violet hues, deepening to a bruised purple. In the distance, a convoy of heavy transport ships was approaching the docking ring. They were tagged as resupply vessels by the transponder system, but Jaro had spent 50 years looking at ships. He knew how a supply ship moved. It lumbered. These ships moved with the predatory grace of troop carriers. "They are not bringing food," Jaro whispered. He reached for his personal communicator, bypassing the school network. "All instructors stand by. This is not a drill. I repeat, the gauntlet is compromised." Deep in the student dormitories, the mood was frantic. Cadets were checking weapons, syncing armor protocols, and saying final prayers to whatever deities their species worshipped. In the center of the room, Alice Vulpera stood staring at her datapad. Her face was pale, the fur on her ears standing on end. She had just received a message. It was encrypted with a royal cipher that had not been used in a decade. "What is it?" Peter asked. He was sitting on his bunk, calmly lacing his boots. The neurobraid connecting them was buzzing with her distress, a sharp, cold frequency that tasted like iron. "My father," Alice said, her voice barely a whisper. "He knows. He knows everything." She turned the screen toward Peter. The message was brief, stripped of all royal formalities. "Use the maintenance lift to Sector Sub-3. Coordinates attached. I could not stop them, only prepare you. Remember, he fits." "He fits," Peter repeated, testing the weight of the words. He is not talking about marriage, Alice. He is talking about mechanics. Sector Sub-3 does not exist on the public maps, Alice said, grabbing her kinetic gauntlets. It is beneath the reactor shielding. If we go down there, we will be late for the gauntlet muster. We will be disqualified. If we stay up here, Peter said, standing up and checking the charge on his multi-tool. We are going to be dead. Those ships docking outside are not here to grade our homework. They moved quickly, slipping out of the dorms before the main roll call. The corridors were bustling with nervous energy, allowing them to blend in. They found the maintenance lift behind a recycling unit in the lower galleries. Peter hacked the keypad not with a brute force attack, but by looping the sensor feed, so the AI thought the door was still closed. The lift descended. Down past the classrooms, past the hangars, past the engineering decks. The air grew colder. The hum of the station's gravity generators became a throbbing vibration in the floor. When the doors opened, they were in a cavernous circular chamber that smelled of ancient dust and ozone. The walls were lined with copper piping that pulsed with a faint blue light. In the center of the room stood a machine. It was unlike anything Peter had ever seen. It looked organic, a loom, woven from chrome and bone standing 10 feet tall. Thousands of optical fibers hung from it, like the strings of a harp, all converging on a single empty chair in the center. The suture loom, Alice whispered, reading the faded inscription on the plinth. It is a legend. The old text said it was used to stitch reality back together after the first warp wars. It is not a legend, Peter said, walking around the device. He ran his hand over the console. It is an amplifier. Look at the inputs. Neural interface ports, 2 of them. He pointed to the base of the chair. There were 2 connection points. One was clearly designed for standard neural jacks. The other was different, complex, jagged, and requiring a biological adapter that looked terrifyingly specific. One for the pilot, Peter analyzed, and one for the battery. Alice stepped closer. My father sent us here. He fits. He meant you fit the machine, Peter. You are the component that makes this work. And you are the pilot, Peter said, looking at her. The Fox Crown mind. Your species has the highest psychic density in the Alliance. This machine takes your will and amplifies it through my nervous system. To do what? To close the rift, Alice realized. The horror of the burden settled on her shoulders. Or to open it wide enough to swallow a fleet. Before they could investigate further, the station shuddered. A deep, booming impact resonated through the hull, shaking dust from the ceiling. Peter's datapad lit up. It was Tamsin Crow. Guys, Tamsin's voice was high-pitched and breathless. Where are you? The supply ships just blew the airlock doors. We have armed boarders in the mess hall. They are not taking prisoners. They are wearing Malth's colors. It has started, Alice said. Her eyes hardened. The confusion vanished, replaced by the cold clarity of the warrior princess. Malth is here. Peter looked at the suture loom, then at the ceiling. We cannot use this machine yet. We do not know how. And if Malth finds us down here, trapped in a dead-end room, the story ends. So we go up, Alice said, her gauntlets humming as she powered them up. We fight. No, Peter said. We do not fight. We are 2 students against an invasion fleet. If we fight fair, we die in 5 minutes. He pulled up the station schematics on the large wall monitor. His eyes darted across the blueprints, the ventilation systems, the gravity plating, the waste disposal ejectors, the mining lasers used for asteroid defense. This station is not a fortress, Peter said, a small, dangerous smile touching his lips. It is an industrial facility. It is full of heavy machinery designed to crush rocks and vent gas. Alice looked at him. She felt the shift in the neurobraid. The quiet, boring boy was gone. In his place was something sharp, calculating, and terrifyingly creative. "What is the plan?" she asked. Peter pointed to the airlock controls. "We turn the school into a haunted house. We do not defend the hallways. We weaponize the architecture." The main atrium of Helix Bastion was a war zone. Laser fire scorched the pristine white walls. Students were scattering, screaming, as heavily armored mercenaries poured through the breached docking rings. These were not the simulated droids from the trials. These were veteran killers, commanded by Ravel Knox. Knox stood on the upper balcony overlooking the chaos. He spoke into his comms. "Secure the perimeter. Drive the students toward the Rift observation deck. The consul wants an audience when he arrives." Down below, a group of first-year cadets, mostly small, non-combat species, were cornered behind a fountain. A squad of mercenaries advanced on them, weapons raised. "Target acquired," the lead mercenary said. "Clearing the obstruction." He raised his rifle. Suddenly, the gravity in that specific section of the hallway reversed. The mercenaries screamed as they were violently yanked upward, slamming into the ceiling with a sickening crunch. The first-years who were outside the targeted zone stared in amazement as their attackers hung pinned to the roof, their legs dangling uselessly. "What is happening?" Knox yelled into his headset. "Engineering report." "Sir, we are losing control of the environmental systems," a technician replied, panic in his voice. "Someone is rerouting the power from the sublevels. They are isolating sectors randomly." "It is not random," Knox hissed. "It is him." In a service corridor, 3 decks up, Peter was typing furiously on a terminal he had hot-wired into the wall. Tamsin Crow was beside him, acting as a router, bouncing his signals to avoid detection. "Gravity trap active in Sector 4, Peter said. "Tamsin, vent the steam from the laundry recyclers into the east wing. Let us blind them." "On it," Tamsin said, her fingers flying. "By the way, Peter, just for the record, we are absolutely getting expelled for this. I am pretty sure destroying the gravity generator voids our warranty." "We can appeal," Peter said without looking up. "Focus. Alice, you are up." Down in the east wing, the corridor filled with thick, scalding white steam. The mercenaries coughed and cursed their thermal visors, white out by the heat. "Hold formation," their commander shouted. "It is just steam." Out of the white fog, a shadow moved. Alice Vulpera did not run. She danced. With the steam obscuring their aim, she was a phantom. She moved into their ranks, her kinetic strikes precise and devastating. She didn't kill. She shattered rifles. She targeted knee joints and servo motors. She broke their ability to fight, leaving them groaning on the floor. She moved with a cold, terrifying restraint. Every instinct in her blood screamed to tear their throats out, to exact the price for her brother. But through the neurobraid, she felt Peter's steady, rhythmic heartbeat. It was an anchor. Disarm. Disable. Move on. She dropped the last mercenary with a sweep of her tail and a palm strike to his solar plexus. "Clear," she said into the comms. "Good." Peter's voice came back calm as ever. "Now, get to the junction. We have a problem in the mess hall." As Alice sprinted toward the next trouble spot, a massive shape stepped out from a side door. It was Darius Kane. The Saurian was covered in soot, holding a heavy repeater cannon he had ripped from a fallen turret. He looked at Alice, then at the groaning mercenaries on the floor. "You left them alive," Darius rumbled. It was an accusation, but there was curiosity in it. "Dead men do not tell us where Malth is," Alice said, not slowing down. "Are you coming, or are you going to stand there and pose?" Darius grunted, falling into step beside her. "The human he is doing this, the gravity, the steam." "He is rearranging the furniture," Alice said. Darius smirked, showing a row of razor-sharp teeth. "He fights like a poltergeist. I accept his command. For now." They reached the mess hall. The situation was dire. 50 students were pinned down by a heavy weapons team. The mercenaries had set up a repeating blaster behind a barricade of overturned tables. I cannot get close, Alice said, sliding into cover. That blaster will shred me. I can take the hit, Darius offered, but I cannot reach them before they reload. Peter, Alice called over the link. We are pinned. Mess hall. Heavy repeater. I see it on the sensors, Peter replied. Give me 10 seconds. Do not move. What is he going to do? Darius asked. I have no idea, Alice admitted, but cover your ears. 10 seconds later, the wall beside the mercenaries exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was a high-velocity mining drone, a hovering sphere equipped with a diamond-tipped drill that had smashed through the bulkhead like a cannonball. Peter had remote-piloted a mining drone from the asteroid hangar, flew it through the ventilation shafts and rammed it through the wall at 300 miles per hour. The impact sent the mercenaries flying. The drone spun wildly, its drill shrieking, creating instant chaos. Now! Alice shouted. She and Darius vaulted the barricade. With the enemy distracted by the rogue mining equipment, they made short work of the squad. As the dust settled, the students who had been pinned down slowly stood up. They were a mix of species prey and predator alike. A small, rodent-like cadet looked up at Darius with wide, terrified eyes. Darius looked at the small creature. Instincts honed by millions of years of evolution told him this was food. But then he heard Peter's voice over the general PA system which Tamsin had just hijacked. Attention all students. This is Cadet Peter. The faculty is compromised. The borders are hostile. We are initiating protocol herd defense. Heavy combat classes form a perimeter around the tech and bio tracks. If you have claws, you are a shield. If you have a brain, you are a weapon. Work together or die alone. Darius looked at the rodent cadet. He growled low in his throat, then stepped in front of the smaller student, placing his massive bulk between the kid and the door. Stay behind me, little one, Darius rumbled. Today, nothing eats you. All across the station, the dynamic shifted. The rigid hierarchy of the Academy Predator, over prey, strong over weak, shattered. In the library, Earthside cadets were flipping heavy bookcases to create cover for the avian researchers. In the labs, chemistry students were mixing volatile compounds and handing them to the fast runners to use as grenades. Instructor Jaro Sen, watching from a hidden security feed in the locked-down command center, felt a strange tightness in his chest. They are not panicking, he whispered to himself. They are coordinating. He saw a group of humans and changelings luring a mercenary squad into an airlock, then cycling the pressure to knock them unconscious. He saw Alice and Darius fighting back to back, a whirlwind of kinetic energy and raw power. Humans, Jaro muttered, shaking his head with a mix of disbelief and pride. They do not just survive. They domesticate the chaos. However, the element of surprise could only last so long. Consul Knox reported his voice cutting through the noise of the battle. The students are resisting. The human has compromised the environmental controls. On the bridge of his flagship, the Gilded Fang, Garen Malth, watched the tactical display. He saw his troops being slowed down by steam gravity and mining drones. He did not look angry. He looked amused. Ingenious, Malth said, but ultimately futile. He is playing with toys. Let us show him the real tools. Malth pressed a button on his command chair. Deploy the void breakers and target the structural supports of the student dorms. Give them a choice: surrender the pair or watch their friends vent into space. The station shook violently. 3 massive explosions rocked the outer ring. Peter, Tamsin, screamed over the comms. They hit the structural stabilizers. We are losing atmospheric integrity in sectors 1 through 5. And they are hurting us, Peter said, his voice tight. They are cutting off our movement options. They want us at the rift. Then we go to the rift, Alice said. She and Darius had met up with Peter and Tamsin at the junction leading to the observation deck. Peter looked at his team. Tamsin was covered in grease and shaking, but holding a plasma welder like a pistol. Darius was bleeding from a dozen small cuts, but looking more alive than he ever had. Alice was glowing with sweat and determination. "We cannot win a siege," Peter said. "Malth has a fleet. We have a broken school. We need to change the battlefield." "How?" Darius asked. "The suture loom," Peter said. "It is the only leverage we have. If Malth wants the rift open, he needs us alive. If we threaten to destroy the loom or use it incorrectly." "It is a bluff," Alice said. "It is a gambit," Peter corrected. "We retreat to the loom chamber. We force Malth to come to us, on our ground." "That is a dead end," Darius pointed out. "It is only a dead end if we do not have a way out," Peter said. He looked at Alice. "Trust me." Alice looked at him. The neurobraid was humming with his fear. He was terrified. But beneath the fear was a bedrock of resolve. "Always," she said. The retreat to the sublevels was a running battle. Knox and his elite guard were hot on their heels. They reached the heavy blast doors of Sector Sub-3. Peter welded them shut behind them, buying them a few minutes. The room was as they had left it. The suture loom stood silent and imposing in the center. "They are cutting through the door," Tamsin yelled, checking her sensors. 2 minutes, Max." "Darius, Tamsin, hold the entrance," Peter ordered. "Alice, get in the chair." Alice climbed into the suture loom. The machine seemed to wake up as she approached, lights flickering along its chrome ribs. She sat down, and the optical fibers drifted toward her head like seeking vines. "This is going to hurt," Peter warned. He took his position at the base of the machine, kneeling by the secondary interface. He grabbed the jagged biological cable. It looked incompatible with human physiology. "Peter," Alice said, her voice trembling. "What happens if this kills you?" "Then you write a very nice eulogy," Peter said. "Something about my dashing good looks." He jammed the cable into the port on his neck. Scream. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic shockwave. Peter's back arched, his eyes rolling back into his head. The machine wasn't just connecting to his nerves. It was interrogating his DNA. It was looking for the fit. Alice screamed too as the feedback hit her. She felt Peter's mind being pulled apart and stitched back together. She felt the ancient alien code of the machine scanning him. Subject human. Anomaly detected. Compatibility absolute. The machine roared to life. The copper pipes on the walls blazed with blinding blue light. The hum deepened into a chant. Outside the station, the echo rift stopped swirling. It froze. Then slowly, the violet clouds began to rotate in a perfect geometric spiral. It wasn't the chaotic motion of a storm anymore. It was a pattern, a language. The rift was answering. The blast doors melted. Sparks showered the room. Ravel Knox stepped through the hole, flanked by 2 heavy combat droids. Behind him, walking with the casual arrogance of a king, was Garen Malth. Malth looked at the glowing machine, at Alice in the chair, and at Peter convulsing on the floor connected to the base. "Beautiful," Malth whispered. "I was told the suture was a myth, but here it is. And you," he looked at Peter, "you are the fuse." Darius and Tamsin raised their weapons, but they were vastly outgunned. Malth's droids tracked them with laser sights. "Stand down," Malth ordered, "or I kill the mechanic, and if he dies, the machine stops." Alice struggled against the restraints of the chair. The loom was active, pumping raw energy through her mind. She could feel the rift outside. It felt huge, ancient and waiting. "Let them go," Alice gasped. "No," Malth smiled. He walked closer to Peter, who was shivering, sweat pouring down his face. Malth nudged Peter with his boot. "You have opened the door, boy," Malth said. "Now widen it. My fleet is waiting to cross." Peter looked up. His eyes were glowing not with the reflection of the lights, but with an internal luminescence. The gray was gone, replaced by the violet of the rift. He didn't speak to Moth. He spoke to Alice through the braid. His voice in her head was distorted, amplified by the machine, sounding like a chorus of 1,000 voices. Alice, do not fight the machine. Guide it. Guide it where she thought back, panic rising. The rift is not a door, Peter's thought echoed. It is a mirror. Show him what he really is. Moth leaned down, grabbing Peter by the hair. I said widen it, bring the fleet through. Peter grinned. It was a terrifying, blood-filled grin. You want to see what is on the other side, Consul? Peter rasped aloud. Okay, look. Peter slammed his hand onto the manual override. The suture loom screamed. A beam of pure energy shot from the machine through the station's hull and straight into the heart of the Echo Rift. The rift didn't open. It inverted. The spiral pattern expanded, turning from violet to a blinding, burning white. The gravity in the room shifted. Everyone was pinned to the floor. What are you doing? Knox screamed, checking his readings. The gravitational constant is fluctuating. The fleet, their engines are stalling. He fits, Alice whispered. Her eyes closed, her mind locked with Peter's in a dance of pure power. He isn't the key to the door. He is the lock. And I just swallowed the key, Peter groaned. The station groaned as the rift began to pull. Not pulling the station, but pulling at the intent of those nearby. The echo of the rift amplified emotion. And right now, it was amplifying Peter's stubbornness and Alice's judgment. Moth looked at the viewing screen. His ships were not moving forward. They were being pushed back by a wall of white light. Stop it! Moth yelled, pulling a pistol and aiming it at Peter's head. Shoot him! Alice's voice boomed, amplified by the loom, and you destroy the only thing keeping the rift from collapsing on your fleet. Moth hesitated. For the first time, the calm mask of the manipulator cracked. He looked at the boy on the floor, the girl in the chair, and the ancient machine that hummed with the heartbeat of a star. You think this is a victory, Moth hissed. You have trapped us all here. I did not trap us with you. Peter wheezed, looking up with defiance. I trapped you with us. And outside, the rift pulsed once, twice, like a giant heart, waiting for the command to either heal the universe or tear it apart. The sub-Sector 3 chamber was vibrating with a frequency that rattled the teeth. The suture loom, that ancient grotesquerie of chrome and bone, hummed, with a sound that felt less like machinery and more like a chanting choir of ghosts. Peter knelt at the base of the machine, his body arcing in spasms as the biocable interfaced directly with his central nervous system. Above him, strapped into the pilot's chair, Alice Volpera screamed silently, her eyes rolled back, caught in the psychic riptide of the connection. Standing over them, Consul Garen Mouth watched with the detached appreciation of an art critic viewing a particularly violent sculpture. Do not fight it, boy, Mouth said, his voice smooth, despite the chaotic noise of the station crumbling around them. You are the conduit. The rift wants to enter. Be polite, open the door. Behind, Mouth Ravel Knox stepped over the debris of the blast door. He held a datapad in one hand and a heavy pulse pistol in the other. He looked at Alice, his pale face twisting into a sneer. She is resisting, Knox observed, tapping his screen. Her cortical patterns are spiking with aggression. She is trying to reject the link. She is a Vulpera, Mouth said dismissively. Aggression is her baseline. Breaking it will just make the connection stronger. In the corner, pinned down by Mouth's heavy combat droids, Darius Kane roared. The Saurian was bleeding from a shrapnel wound in his flank, but he was still trying to rise. Let them go, coward, Darius bellowed. Face me, Mouth ignored him. He walked closer to Peter, crouching down so his face was inches from the sweating, convulsing human. You know, Mouth whispered. I have studied your file, Peter. The mining colony of Hestia Prime. A tragic accident, the official report said. Atmosphere stabilizers failed. 3,000 people suffocated in their sleep. Peter's eyes snapped open. They were glowing with a terrifying violet luminescence, leaking the energy of the rift. "It was not an accident," Peter grated out his voice, sounding like grinding stones. "No," Malth agreed cheerfully. "It was a field test. We needed to calibrate the emotional resonance of the echo rift. We needed to know if mass despair could trigger a spatial dilation. And it did. The terror of your parents powered my fleet's jump drives for a month." He pulled a small projector from his pocket and activated it. A holographic recording sprang to life in the air above Peter's head. It was grainy footage from the Hestia Prime Command Center. It showed the oxygen levels dropping. It showed the crew clawing at their throats. It showed the silent, gasping end of Peter's childhood. "Look at it," Malth commanded. "Feel it. That hate you have buried under your boring exterior, that rage, let it out. Feed the machine." Peter stared at the hologram. The gray wall in his mind, the carefully constructed barrier of boredom and pragmatism, began to crack. He remembered the smell of the stale air. He remembered the sound of his mother falling to the floor, her hand reaching for him. He felt a scream, building in his chest, a scream that had been waiting for 10 years. The suture loom flared. The violet light turned a sickly, angry red. Outside the station, the echo rift roared. The spiral pattern began to fracture, tearing open a hole in space that looked like a bleeding wound. "Yes," Malth laughed, standing up and spreading his arms. "The door opens, come through." Through the neurobraid, Alice felt Peter's mind collapsing. It was like watching a building implode. The silence was replaced by a firestorm of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Kill him," the thought echoed in her head. It wasn't her thought. It was Peter's. Tear him apart, burn the station, burn the fleet, burn everything. Alice gasped. She had wanted revenge for so long, but feeling the raw, unfiltered toxicity of Peter's rage terrified her. It was not a cleansing fire. It was a nuclear winter. "Peter!" she screamed into the mind link. "Peter, look at me!" "He killed them," Peter's mind screamed back. "He used them as batteries. I am going to end him." "If you do," Alice's voice cut through the red haze, "you become him, and I am left alone." The words hung in the psychic hurricane. Peter froze. The image of Malth's face wavered in his vision. He looked up past the hologram to the girl in the chair. He saw Alice. Not the princess, not the warrior, but the partner. The one who had trusted him when he was invisible. The one who had chosen the silent back row boy when she could have had a king. "Alone," Peter whispered aloud. He closed his eyes. He took a breath. It was a shuddering, painful breath. "Winning without being admired," Peter murmured. "Doing the job." He reached into the hurricane of his own rage and found the off switch. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. It felt like holding a grenade and choosing not to throw it because there were civilians in the blast radius. The red light in the loom flickered and died. The violet glow returned, but it was steady, calm. "No," Malth shouted, seeing the rift outside stabilize. "Do not suppress it. Use the anger." Peter looked up at the console. The violet light in his eyes was now clear like a polished gem. "I am human console," Peter said. "We do not just react, we choose." "You choose death then," Malth snarled. He raised his pistol, aiming between Peter's eyes. "Console," Knox yelled, pointing at Alice. Alice had broken the physical restraints. Not with strength, but with precision. The loom's energy was flowing through her, now responding to her command. She didn't leap at Malth. She didn't scream. She sat up, her eyes burning with emerald fire. "Knox," she said. Her voice was amplified by the machine echoing off the walls. Ravel Knox, the master spy, the shapeshifter, took a step back. "Princess," he stammered. "You tried to make me kill him," Alice said. "You manipulated my grief. You thought I was a beast that could be pointed at a target. She raised a hand. The copper pipes on the wall behind Knox exploded outward, wrapping around him like metal snakes. The telekinetic surge was precise. It pinned Knox to the wall, trapping his arms and legs, leaving him unharmed but completely immobilized. "I am not a beast," Alice said coldly. "I am a queen, and queens do not murder. We execute justice." Malth fired at Peter, but the bolt never reached him. A shimmering wall of violet energy materialized in the air, absorbing the plasma shot. "The loom," Malth gasped. "You are controlling it." "That is impossible. The neural load would liquefy your brain." "We are not controlling it," Peter said, standing up. The biocable was still attached to his neck, pulsing with light. He looked like a cyborg deity, wired into the soul of the station. "We are asking it." He walked toward Malth. Malth backed away, firing again and again, but the shots dissolved into harmless sparks against the shield. "How?" Malth screamed. "You are a nobody, a miner's son." "That is where you are wrong," Alice said, stepping down from the dais. She stood beside Peter. The neurobraid between them was visible now, a physical arc of lightning connecting their minds. "Plot twist," Peter said, his voice dry and weary. "He fits." Malth stared. "What?" "My father's message," Alice explained. He did not approve Peter as a suitor. He identified him as a component. Alice looked at Peter, and the realization flowed between them, shared instantly. "The suture loom was built by the ancients to close tears in reality," Alice said. "It requires two specific keys: a crown mind, to direct the will that is the Vulpera royal line, and a suture to endure the stress." "A suture," Peter continued, tapping the port on his neck. "A rare neurological mutation. 1 in 10 billion. My brain does not filter out the background noise of the universe. It absorbs it." Peter looked at Malth with a sad smile. "You asked why I was always silent, Malth. Why did I sat in the back row? Why did I never spoke?" "Because you were weak," Malth spat. "No," Peter said softly. "Because it is loud. Since I was 5 years old, I have heard the rift screaming. It sounds like a million people crying. I had to build a wall in my mind just to hear myself think. I had to be boring because if I got excited, the barrier would drop, and the noise would kill me." Malth went pale. "You are a living receiver." "And she is the transmitter," Peter said, nodding at Alice. "Together we are not a key to open your door console." "We are the deadbolt," Alice finished. Peter grabbed the manual levers of the loom. Alice placed her hands over his. "Close it," Alice commanded. "With pleasure," Peter said. They pulled the levers down. The suture loom shrieked. A beam of white blinding light shot from the station, straight into the center of the echo rift. But instead of widening the tear, the beam grabbed the edges of the rift and pulled. It was impossible physics. It was the universe stitching itself back together. Outside, the invasion fleet of Garen Malth was positioning for the jump. Their engines were spooled up, relying on the spatial dilation of the open rift. When the rift suddenly snapped shut, the spatial geometry inverted. "Time dilation effect." Malth's datapad screamed. "Temporal shear detected." "No," Malth yelled, running to the viewport. The fleet didn't explode. It froze. The ships were caught in a bubble of stasis, trapped in the scar tissue of the healing universe. They were there, visible but locked in a single second of time. "They are stuck," Darius Kane laughed from his corner, clutching his bleeding side. "Like flies in amber." The rift was gone. In its place was a smooth, silent field of stars. The energy in the room dissipated. The lights dimmed. Peter collapsed. "Peter." Alice dropped to her knees, catching him before he hit the floor. She ripped the biocable from his neck. He wasn't breathing. "No, no, no," Alice sobbed, pressing her hands to his chest. "Do not you dare be boring now! Wake up!" She slammed her fist against his chest. A kinetic jolt, small and controlled to restart his heart. Nothing. "Come on," she hit him again. "You promised we have to fill out the appeal paperwork." Darius dragged himself over. "Let me," the Saurian grunted. He raised a massive fist. "Do not crush him," Alice yelled. "I know how to deliver CPR," Darius said offendedly. "It is part of the advanced predator curriculum." He pressed down on Peter's chest with surprising gentleness. 1, 2, 3. Peter gasped, a ragged, desperate intake of air. He coughed, his eyes fluttering open. The violet glow was gone. They were just gray, tired human eyes. "Ow!" Peter wheezed. "Who hit me with a truck?" "I did," Alice said, tears streaming down her face. She buried her face in his neck, hugging him so hard his ribs creaked. "You idiot. You absolute idiot." "I missed you too," Peter whispered, patting her hair awkwardly. He looked over Alice's shoulder. Mouth was standing by the window, staring at his frozen fleet. He looked broken. The Grand Manipulator stripped of his army, stripped of his leverage. Mouth turned slowly. He reached for his fallen pistol. "It is not over," Mouth whispered. "I can still—" A massive scaled hand clamped around Mouth's wrist. Darius Kane stood there, towering over the console. Darius didn't look like a student anymore. He looked like a warlord. "The class is dismissed, Consul," Darius rumbled. He squeezed. Bones crunched. Mouth screamed and dropped the gun. Darius kicked the consul behind the knees, forcing him to kneel before Alice and Peter. "Your prey, Princess," Darius said. Alice stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. She looked at Mouth, the man who had ordered the death of her brother, the man who had terrorized Peter. She picked up the pistol. She aimed it at Mouth's head. Mouth looked up, sweat dripping down his face. "Do it," he hissed. "Prove you are a killer. Prove you are mine." Alice's finger tightened on the trigger. The room held its breath. Then she shifted her aim 3 inches to the right and fired. The bolt hit the floor next to Mouth's ear. "You are not worth the paperwork," Alice said. She tossed the gun to Darius. "Bind him. We are taking him to the Alliance High Court. I want him to spend the next 50 years in a glass cell, watching the universe go on without him." Mouth slumped defeated, not by violence, but by irrelevance. Peter smiled from the floor. "Good choice. I really didn't want to clean that up." An hour later, the blast doors were cut open from the outside. Instructor Jaro Sen walked in, followed by a squad of heavily armed medics and Alliance peacekeepers. Jaro stopped in the doorway. He took in the scene. Ravel Knox was wrapped in copper tubing, unconscious. Garen Mouth was tied up, with what looked like torn strips of a lavish cape, guarded by a very smug-looking Darius Kane. And in the center of the room, Alice sat on the floor holding Peter's hand, while a medic scanned his neck. Jaro walked over to them. His optical sensors whirred as he scanned the suture loom, reading the residual energy signatures. "You closed it," Jaro said. It wasn't a question. "The echo rift. It is silent." "We put a lid on it," Peter said, his voice raspy. "It was too noisy." "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Jaro asked, his voice shaking slightly. "That rift has been open for 1,000 years. You didn't just pass the gauntlet. You altered the cosmological constant of the sector." "Does that mean we get extra credit?" Tamsin Crow asked, popping her head out from behind the machine where she had been hiding during the firefight. Jaro looked at the ragtag group: a fox princess, a silent human, a saurian warlord, and a grease-stained engineer. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Yes," Jaro said. "I suppose it does." He watched as the medics loaded Peter onto a stretcher. Alice refused to let go of the stretcher rail, walking beside him, arguing with the lead doctor about the sedative dosage. "He has a high metabolism for tranquilizers," Alice was shouting. "Do not underdose him." I am fine, Alice, Peter mumbled. I just want a nap. Jaro watched them leave. He looked at the empty suture loom. Humans, Jaro muttered, shaking his head. Every other species sees a catastrophe and builds a bunker. Humans see a catastrophe and build a sewing machine. He paused, looking at the hand-holding silhouette of the pair in the hallway. They weaponize hope, he whispered. Terrifying. Epilogue, 3 months later. The Helix Bastion was still under repairs, but classes had resumed. The atmosphere was different now. The tension between predator and prey had not vanished, but it had changed. There was a new respect. Peter sat on the observation deck looking out at the stars. The echo rift was gone. In its place was a scar, a long silver streak in the darkness that shimmered like a healed wound. It was quiet. For the first time in his life, Peter's head was quiet. Alice sat down next to him. She didn't say anything. She just placed 2 cups of hot tea on the railing. Malth's trial starts tomorrow, Alice said after a while. They want us to testify. We will be there, Peter said. My father sent a message, Alice said. She stared into her tea. He wants me to come home. He says the experiment is concluded. He wants to discuss a formal alliance with Earth. Are you going? Peter asked. Alice turned to him. Her eyes caught the light of the silver scar in space. He fits, she said softly. That is what he said. But he was wrong about one thing. What? He thought you were just a part of the machine, Alice said. She reached out and took his hand, weaving her fingers through his. He didn't know you were the pilot. Peter squeezed her hand. I am just the guy in the back row, Alice. Not anymore, she said. They sat in silence, watching the stars. But deep in the void, where the rift used to be, a single pulse of light flickered. It wasn't the violet of the old rift. It was gold. It pulsed, once a friendly questioning signal. Are you there? Peter felt it. He smiled, sipping his tea. Who built it, do you think? Alice asked, looking at the suture loom's signature in the sky. The loom. It was waiting for us, specifically us, a human and a vulpera, 2 species that didn't even meet until 50 years ago. Maybe the ancients were good at guessing, Peter said. Or maybe, Alice said, leaning her head on his shoulder, they knew that eventually someone would need to stitch the world back together. Well, Peter said, closing his eyes and enjoying the silence. If they break it again, I am charging double for the repairs. Deal, Alice said. The partner bell rang in the distance, signaling the start of the next class. But they didn't move. They just sat there, 2 heartbeats in a quiet universe listening to the future begin.